If everything can be paused, I will ask the spiritual court to put death on hold, so we can have time to breathe, and the rain of tears shall stop.
I have an appeal to the Supreme Court of Justice and Truth. Your mediation is necessary. Pause everything for a moment.
March on March, I was saying that there's something very specific in starting an organization, which is different to starting a service delivery protest. You have to have resources and be organized, buses, T-shirts, and all those things. So they call themselves, they're dealing with illegal immigration. That particular xenophobic movement, because they are resolving the problem amongst Africans. It's a problem amongst Africans.
I always say when it comes to politics, politics is not an African material. And again, education is a scam. I know there are many benefits that you may get from your qualification. There are many benefits that you may get as a result of going to school. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But when it comes to my general perspectives, when it comes to the entire structure of education, I can say is a scam. Because in most instances, it will produce people who even fail to use their own logic. This is the problem. And the very same people who always complain about mainstream media, in other words, the biasness of the mainstream media, they are also biased. They don't want to use logic. They don't want to align with the truth. They don't want to align with accountability and honesty. Why? Because while you are busy focusing on the truth and accountability, many people are focusing on building their profiles. This is what politics is all about. So that is why I always say politics is not an African material. So that is why if you're going to use politics, which is not an African material, to solve African problems, then in other words, you are going to be very distant. That is why politicians are very far, they are very distant from the people they claim to be representing, because they claim to be representing us on the ground. But by the way they move, by the way they do things, then you can tell that these people, they are far from representing us. Because in politics, there's capitalism, there's socialism, there's totalitarianism, all these different kinds of isms. You find them in politics. And the umbrella structure, which is politics, is not even African materials. And all these isms are not African material. And even the same umbrella, which is politics, is not African. It's not African material. So that is why it becomes difficult. Even if you can become a political scientist, even if you can become a master, but you become far from the people, because at the end of the day, you have to remove this gown of politics so that you can align with the people, so that you can connect with the people. So most of the people are busy protecting themselves. Most of the people are busy building their own profiles. In other words, they are like, as I speak right now, who is watching me? Probably I may get a call somewhere. Probably I may become a future secretary general of a certain organization. I may become, like, for an example, a member of a certain company based on how I speak. But in most cases, they know that if you are aligned with the truth and accountability, it's very rare to get those opportunities, to get those privileges. Because even when it comes to media, even when it comes to social media, truth doesn't trend, honesty doesn't trend. So that is why the moment you say there's xenophobia in South Africa, then the algorithm will kick out that content so that that content may be spread all over the world. There's no xenophobia in South Africa. This is the truth. In South Africa, there's a problem of what? There's a problem of accountability, corruption amongst government leaders. In other words, from the municipalities, from the councillors to the presidency, to the office of the president, there's corruption. So in other words, if there's corruption, maladministration, this tendency of ignoring people and all those things, then people are going to be frustrated. Why? Because where there's corruption, then it means everybody do as they please. And they do all these things so that they can benefit themselves. Then as a result, the frustration will erupt amongst the people like a volcano. And you cannot easily control it. There's no xenophobia. These people who are protesting, these people who are talking on social media, they are trying by all means to fix the country, to raise the issues so that their voices can be heard by the leadership in government, by the president. But they are getting ignored. This issue is not a new issue. Even during the times of Jacob Zuma, there was this thing of xenophobia. Even during the times of Thabo Mbeki, there was this thing of that South Africa is xenophobia. So the moment you type a word xenophobia on the internet, is always associated with South Africa. Why? Because it has been there for a long time. So this is the word which is used to silence the people. In other words, to prevent the people from raising their issues. When it comes to government, the government is corrupt. We have to be honest that the problem that we have here is the government is corrupt. And when it comes to the departments that are corrupt, in other words, that are fueling this thing of xenophobia so that we may look as if we are xenophobic, so that South Africa may look as if it's a xenophobic country. Number one is Home Affairs. Number two is the Department of Labor. And number three is all these companies all over South Africa. They are fueling this thing of xenophobia because they are taking advantage of what is happening. Yes, we have our own brothers and sisters who are working for these departments because they are corrupt. Why? Because they've learned this corruption from the top leaders. They are corrupt as well. That is why they issue all these temporary visas that are illegal, something like, for an example, asylum seekers that are not even legal. They issue them. Why they issue them is because they are getting paid. And at the same time, we have top officials who are in control, who are in charge of this whole thing because there's an agenda here. There's an agenda here. They bring or they allow all illegal immigrants to come here for a reason. There's a reason why they allow that to happen. But why I say these departments are corrupt is because you have to regulate everything accordingly. And when it comes to the Department of Labor, you have to make sure that the companies comply because these people, they come through these companies. They come through these companies. In other words, they enter into a country so that they can go and survive in these companies. Because if it wasn't for these companies, most of these people would not come here. And again, we have those who are involved in criminality. The reason they come here so that they can, like, for an example, pursue their goals and objectives through criminality. This is what is happening. So now, when all these things are happening, it doesn't mean people are sleeping. People will complain about certain people to say, you know what? There are people who are selling the powder. There are people who are selling certain substances. There are people who are involved in criminality. But people will still remain calm. People will still remain calm. That is why when we talk about the drug problem right now, it doesn't mean it's a new problem. This is a problem which has been there for a long period of time. So right now, this is the time when people are, like, for an example, showing themselves that they've been, like, oppressed by the system. So that is why now they are, like, showing their frustrations to everybody else. Then instead of these people to pay attention and listen, they call it xenophobia. Why? So that you can, like, feel ashamed, so that you can regret, so that you can say, oh no, I'm wrong. It's like a bully. It's like someone who's taking advantage of you. Even if you don't want to help them, because it doesn't mean maybe you can't help them or you don't want to help them, but it's because you have other needs to take care of. So they will try by all means to, like, make you feel guilty that you're supposed to help them no matter what. Then at the end of the day, you'll feel guilty. You'll start feeling guilty and say, you know what? Let me help these people. So they'll try by all means to manipulate you. So this is the media, the government, and all these other politicians. This is how they would behave. Why? Because at the end of the day, people want to prove that they are educated or they are highly educated. So that is why I'm like, education is a scam. So these people are not the people you can trust, even with the evolution of the education of your children here in South Africa. You cannot trust them. So now, who to trust if we cannot trust people like Dr. Ndlozi? Who to trust when it comes to, like, the structuring or the restructuring of our education? If they fail to differentiate simple things, if you fail to differentiate between hate and frustration, you know very well how frustration looks like, how frustration feels like. They know very well how it feels like. So sometimes you may try to, like, hold yourself, apply self-control, but there may be circumstances where you will fail to even control yourself. So emotions are like that, or frustration is like that. So that is why right now it's not controllable. It's not controllable. As a result of what? As a result of drugs, as a result of human trafficking, crime, and a lot of things that are happening in our communities. It's not going to be easy for you to control that kind of frustration. It won't be easy, like it or not.
You are resolving it by mobilizing hate. It's very possible to talk about all those issues without mobilizing hate. It's very possible to speak about the fact that we must all know who we live with. I must know who are you.
There's no hate here. There's no hate. You know, in most cases, the moment you start listening to these people who call themselves a Pan-Africanist, especially modern day Pan-Africanist, because it's all about profile building. Most of these people are just building their profiles. Why? Because they want to be loved by everybody in the continent of Africa, everybody in the world. So that is why they hide behind Pan-Africanism. Not all of them, but many of them. Even when it comes to politicians, most of these politicians, you'll hear them calling themselves Pan-Africanists. Why? It's because they know that most of us, black people, our emotions are always high. So that is why it's difficult for us to use logic. Why? Because our emotions are always high. So the moment even a white man can come and talk about Pan-Africanism, we clap hands. That is why now all these politicians have taken advantage. That is why every podcast is all about Pan-Africanism. Why? Because everyone will support you. You'll get a support from Kenya, from Nigeria, from Zimbabwe, from Uganda, from America, from everywhere. You will get a support. So that is why at the end of the day, it becomes difficult for these people to use logic. Why? Because most of them, they've been like the victims of Pan-Africanism, especially from those who are not even the original Pan-Africanists. In other words, they are just faking it. And those who fake black love as if they love black people, when in reality, they want to just achieve what they want to achieve. There's no hate here. There's no hate. We have a problem of corruption. These people are not doing their job. So now, if these people are not doing their job, the community will start doing the job. And you have to understand that the moment the community start doing the job, they won't follow the protocol. They won't follow the procedure. They won't be nice. They won't, like, for an example, look good or appear good or make nice speeches. It won't happen like that. Why? It comes as a frustration, because the moment the community takes over, you have to know that the leadership is no longer in control. It's like for an example, the moment you see the trailer of a truck, of a truck moving alone, you have to understand that the accident has already taken place. This is what is happening right now. This is what is happening right now. The community is now leading the leaders. And you have to understand that the moment the community is leading the leaders, then the community cannot be soft. You have to understand that they must have been patient, very patient, for a very long time. And now they started taking decisions into their own hands, or making decisions by themselves, and it won't be nice. Why? Because the leaders had an opportunity to, like, for an example, eliminate corruption so that they can, like, for an example, come up with possible solutions. But instead, they are not doing that. They didn't do that. So from all these presidents from 1994, no one tried to even solve this problem of, like, illegal people who come into South Africa, because it's not just the issue of the economy, but it's also the issue of the security. The security, because you have to understand that in South Africa here, majority of the people, majority of the places here in South Africa, we can talk about the small towns, even the big locations, they don't have high security like the estates. The estates are different. So most of these people we call the leaders, they live in luxurious suburbs where there's high security. In most cases, they are not affected. They buy everything online. They have security guards. They are protected all the time. So that is why in most cases, they are not affected by most of these issues. They are not affected by most of these issues. Yet, we still give them a benefit of a doubt to even call them our leaders. But when it comes to reality, they cannot even connect with us because they are very far. There's a gap between us and them. There's a gap. Why? Because, and the most painful thing is that these people, some of these people, they have connection with all these gangsters who are selling powder. They have connection. In other words, they end up having millions and millions is as a result of this powder they are selling to all of us. Then at the end of the day, they want to act as if they are representing us, when in reality, they are destroying the future of this country. Then at the end of the day, they will tell us that we don't have inventors, we cannot think, we cannot do this, when in reality, their aim is to suppress us, is to oppress us, because they are happy when you spend your time, your entire time in taverns, when you spend your time smoking, when you spend your time like using their powder, when you spend your time at work, you have to be busy with something, because the moment you start thinking, you become a threat to them. So that is why they want you to be busy, that even if you're unemployed, but you have to like have time to spend in taverns, you have to use these substances. In other words, you must be busy with something, because the moment you start thinking, you become a threat to these people. There's no xenophobia, there's no hate. It's just that the community has taken law into their hands. When that happens, you have to know that the leadership has failed completely. But these people, they want to use education in each and everything. And to get these qualifications is not even difficult to get these qualifications. So that is why we should not be surprised by how these people think, regardless of the qualifications they have.
Because the day there's a dispute, I must be able to find you. We go to court and resolve my dispute. So no one is going to wake up and say there shouldn't be documentation. Otherwise, how could we plan a country? How would we budget? We need to budget and all those things. But this is
this is the problem. The problem of security. The security issue here is the main problem, because at the end of the day, everybody becomes vulnerable. Our children are vulnerable. Our brothers and sisters are vulnerable. Even before we can talk about employment, we have to talk about security first. And these people who are contributing to this issue are the very same companies and the government. They are contributing to this thing of our security. They contribute to our risk factors. Why? Because they employ these people, knowing very well that these people, they don't have documents. Even if they have the documents, and again, the society has other points as well to say, what about the Constitution? What about the labor laws that are not enforced? That in order for you to work in South Africa, you must have a rare skill. Because when it comes to these jobs, most of them are general work. It's something that you can learn within 2 days, within 3 days. Even when it comes to teaching, even when it comes to certain qualifications. We have a lot of people who have the very same qualifications who are unemployed. Why this law is there? The law is there so that it can regulate the pressure of South Africa, that South Africa should not be under pressure, should not suffer from unemployment. So that is why you are like, if you come from outside, you must have a skill that is rare, a skill that is unique. But by so doing, you know very well that this person becomes an investment, even if he or she comes from another country, but he or she becomes an investment. So we have to stand on the truth. We have to stand on it. We should not lie to one another because we want to be we want to be loved. We love Africans, and we have to love one another, but not at the expense of destroying your brother's future. In other words, I cannot call you my brother. I cannot call you my brother if you're going to destroy my brothers and sisters, if you're going to destroy our children, if you are, in other words, if you are going to steal from us. There's no way I can call you my brother. If you're going to collaborate with the very same colonizer, there's no way, because I cannot call a colonizer my brother. So same applies to an African man who look like me. I cannot call you my brother if your intentions is to destroy. If your intentions is to destroy. And again, I cannot call you my brother if you don't use logic to understand the situation. This thing of African unity, the very same people who sing this thing of African unity. I also talk about African unity. I always talk about African unity. But most of these people who call themselves Pan-Africanists and etc., they are fake because they don't tell you about these things. They don't tell you the truth behind African unity, the work that has to be done for Africa to be united. They don't tell you the economics of it so that you can understand how it's supposed to work. Because when it comes to African unity, each and every country has to be stable first. In other words, all the Africanists in all these countries, they have to make sure that they take over so that all these countries in Africa can have a strength, so that at the end of the day, people wouldn't just flow to one direction. It can be South Africa, or it can be East Africa or West Africa. In other words, people should not like flow into one direction, because that direction or that region will be under pressure, as South Africa is under pressure right now. So in other words, Pan-Africanists, if they are honest, they should teach all Africans to say, right now we can see that, in other words, there's a risk to unite Africans without solving all these problems first. In other words, the very same opportunities people see in Johannesburg, people see in Durban, people see in Cape Town, the very same opportunities should be in each and every country here in Africa. So it's not going to be easy. So that is why Pan-Africanists should go out there and build those countries. So that is why everybody should go out there and fight their government. I say this without fear, because I talk about African unity, but I'm not like it can just happen just like that without fixing these challenges. But most of the people, they will talk as if this thing of African unity is as simple as ABC. Why? Because they want popularity. They want people to support them. They want people to sing their names. But at the end of the day, they are not doing anything. We don't have a Pan-African bank. We don't even have like a Pan-African university. We don't have all these things. But we have a lot of people who talk about Africa Unite. At the expense of who? African unity should not be at the expense of anyone. In other words, African unity should be at the expense of all of us. But I know that these leaders, they only want popularity. They want to just appear good. Why? Because they are already writing their resumes, building their profiles, because there's another colonizer watching them. Probably that colonizer might give them an opportunity.
Why it is, the true name for it is called lumpen radicalism. I give you the most dramatic example. You see the spaza shops of Ethiopians, Pakistanis, and Bangladesh. I think it's very small, but let's say that. They are not in town, far away. They are not in complexes per se. Where are they? In your garages. Who opened the door of the garage for the Ethiopian?
That's not true. That's not true. That's not true. Go to all the places in South Africa, all the towns, the small towns and the big towns, you will find foreign nationals from Pakistan, Afghanistan, and all these other countries. You will find them there before you can even come to our townships. You will find them in all. When we talk about the small towns, right now, the small towns, they are the ones who are dominating the small towns. So that is why most of the small towns have lost value. Why? Because all the stores are ran by them. All these stores are selling the same thing. So that is why most of the towns have lost value. So this is not the truth. In other words, it's not entirely true. Then when it comes to our townships, yes, I may agree that some of our people have leased their properties to these people. But we have to understand the context here, That is why we must have a leader, we must have leadership. Because if we have leadership, leadership will enforce the laws on our behalf. So that is why we have SAPS. That is there to make sure that there's no criminality. Why? Because you cannot just trust the people and say, okay, because you are all adults, you can take care of business. In other words, you can take care of yourselves. In other words, you will make sure that no one is committing crime. Yes, people can take that responsibility, but at the end of the day, we must have leadership because we understand sin nature, that we have sin nature that is out there, that is in control. So same applies when it comes to this whole thing. There will be people who will say, okay, we can see that these people are running stores everywhere. Everywhere is them. And someone will say, but I have a property as well. Let me just lease this property to them. And no one will say anything to them because the government has allowed it. A small hole not mended in time becomes a big hole. It doesn't mean from the beginning our people started, like, for an example, leasing these properties to the outsiders. It was not like that. But a small hole not mended in time becomes a big hole, much more difficult to fix. But these people, they don't want to think about such things. Why? Because they want to prioritize themselves. They want to, in other words, they want to make sure that they protect certain things because these are the people I trusted. These are the people I trusted to say, you know what, if they can take over South Africa, we will have a better education, we'll have a better structure when it comes to education. But you can tell that we are still very far. These are my personal perspectives. I try by all means to align with the truth and accountability. And again, at the same time, we have to be fair. And right now, in the very small towns, many people have realized that as a result of accommodating some of these people, we started we started having problems in our communities. As a result, our towns have deteriorated when it comes to value. In our townships, we have now a problem of crime. There are people who are using powder, and if you ask them, they will always point to those places, to those stores. But if you go to those stores are selling groceries. You ask yourself, what is happening? Where is the truth? But at the end of the day, our children, they keep on suffering from these substances. So that's not an excuse to say we have, like for an example, leased our garages to these people. That's not an excuse. Where is the leadership? Because some of the people ended up doing that because they can see that there's no law and order and nobody is saying anything. But right now, if people can come together and say, now we have these problems, we have problem of powder, kidnapping, and etc., etc. If you can mention all of these problems, even those who are leasing those properties will say, no, now we understand. We understand. But afterwards, you have to come up with a solution to make sure that there's economic development in those places. This is what we are. This is what we want. But the government is slow. Not that the government is slow. The government doesn't want to do anything because the government has the agenda against the people. Just imagine, you are against the people who put you in power. Because all these political parties were put in power by us. No matter whether you got 5%, 3%, 2%, we gave you a vote to be there. But at the end of the day, you're not saying anything. You're not doing anything. But these people, whenever they get an opportunity, they want to sound smart. They want to sound smart. Yes, you can sound smart, but align with the truth. Don't tell lies.
To have a spaza shop. Who takes rent? Then you leave the house and go march. How did you come to the agreement? How do they pay you such that they are engaged in this illegality? And did you say, are you documented? Did you ask those questions? That's the phenomena of let's chase the spaza shops out. But it's a mutual economy. They're not freestanding. They are your business transactions. They are your business. They are in the community. You are the landlords. I mean, if you were to calculate how far Ethiopia is, or how far Pakistan is, it's not possible that they can be in your garage.
Right now, they are redirecting everything. As I've said, these people, when they first came here, they occupied the towns first before they moved to our locations or before they moved to the townships. In other words, when you go to a place that you are not aware of, that you are not familiar with, and the majority of the people in townships, they don't look like you, you are going to try by all means to be in a CBD or in the inner towns where you can try to understand the market, what is happening. But the moment you become familiar that there's lawlessness there, I can do as I want, then you will move even deeper to where the community is staying. This is what happened here. You have to know the history of how it started. After 1994, what happened after 1994? Because after 1994, that's when many people started, like, for an example, going to South Africa to say South Africa is now a democratic country, is now free. So when they like started coming here in the 90s, they were fearful of the law. But the moment they realized that South Africa is not straightforward, they started bringing everybody. They started bringing everybody. Then around like early 2000s, then they started like moving into our locations, having stores now in our locations. Why? Because the government was already out of order at that time. So it's important for you as a politician, because you are close to the people, you claim to be close to the people, you have to know this history. This is a history of almost every town around South Africa. And now when they realize that these people are sleeping and now they are working with them as well, they started selling powder. They started selling powder. And when the companies realized that it's like South Africa is careless, now they said, you know what? From around 2008 now, from around 2008, these companies were like, you know what? We can hire people from outside, even if they don't have documents. Even if they have documents, but we are going to pay them less. That was a strategy. Breaking what? Breaking their constitution. That says you have to come and work here in South Africa only if you have a rare skill, which none of South Africans have that particular skill. Of few South Africans have that particular skill. Then you can come and work here. Even when it comes to business, you must have a certain amount of money, and like, for example, 5 million. And you should also hire a certain number, 60% or maybe 70%, if I'm not mistaken, of South Africans. So the reason no one is benefiting, even SARS is not benefiting, even the government is not benefiting, is because these people, whenever they open a store, they hire one another. This is what is happening. So that is why South Africans are like, you are breaking the law. This is the position of South Africans, that you are breaking. It's not hate, it's not xenophobia, it's not all these things. It's like companies are breaking the law. The Department of Labor is breaking the law. The Department of Home Affairs is breaking the law. Then who will suffer when the frustration breaks out? Who will suffer? The very same people who were hired by these companies are the first ones to suffer. Before our people can burn down these factories and these companies that are led mostly by the oppressors and the colonizers, those who will suffer first are the very same people from Zimbabwe, from Angola, from Mozambique, and etc. and etc. This is what will happen. Should it happen like that? Absolutely not. But the problem is that you cannot control frustration. And at the same time, you should not call frustration hate. But instead, what you should do, you have to go straight to the government or send a message direct to the government and say, we cannot watch our brothers and sisters fighting against one another. Bring the control measure so that you can control this whole thing so that we can know that everybody is following the law. Because if everybody is following the law, then it's going to be easy for us to live peacefully.
Your garage. Does it make sense? So the conversation has to be a bit more responsible, a bit more honest. So the tenderpreneurs are your uncles, they're the ones that hire in the construction sites.
How many tenderpreneurs? Do we have 50 million tenderpreneurs here in South Africa? Do we have even 20 million tenderpreneurs here in South Africa? Do we even have 1 million tenderpreneurs here in South Africa? 500,000 tenderpreneurs here in South Africa? I would understand his point if at least here in South Africa we had at least 100,000 tenderpreneurs. I would understand his perspective. It doesn't work like that. Just because of 10 people, 50 people, 100 people, or 200 tenderpreneurs in South Africa, together with the municipal managers and councillors and mayors, then we have to take everything. We have to take the problem as our problem. We have to regard this problem as it's our problem. We are the ones who created this problem. Absolutely not. In other words, if the municipal manager is corrupt, the councillors are corrupt, the mayor is corrupt, what do you expect from the tenderpreneur? Obvious. The tenderpreneur will make sure that they hire people they can give whatever they can give. If they have to pay you with food, they will pay you with food. Why? So that they can pay the percentage that is required by the corrupt municipal manager, by the corrupt mayor, by the corrupt councillors, because everybody has a share in this tender. The tenderpreneur is not just a tenderpreneur by himself, but a tenderpreneur is a tenderpreneur by these other groups of people. The councillors, the mayors, the municipal managers, and those who issue tenders. And all these people, if you bring their number together, they are not even more than 50,000. So the problem of tenderpreneurs is not our problem, because the tenderpreneurs, most of them are as corrupt as the municipalities that we are always complaining about. They are as corrupt as the government, because they are working together with government officials. So when we talk about the corrupt government, we are not excluding the tenderpreneurs. Why? Because if a tenderpreneur is my uncle, then the municipal manager can be my aunt as well. In other words, the government official, the head of labor department might be my neighbor. But I cannot say just because the head of labor department, because he or she is my neighbor, I cannot talk about this corruption, or I will say his or her corruption is my problem, or I'm the source of the problem. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So the problem of entrepreneurs is not the problem of the community. Is not the problem which is caused by the people. Because when we talk about the tenderpreneurs and the people who have leased the properties to these people, it's only few. Because it's not thousands and thousands of people who are unemployed. It's not thousands and thousands of people or millions of people who have degrees, but they are not working. These people, I highly respect them, but the way they behave, you can tell that they are far from the people.
It's not just the white people. It's not just in the farms. It's the Zimbabweans and the Mozambicans. And those two categories of people have been working in South Africa for over 200 years. But what do we want to resolve? Because we mustn't lie to each other. What is the conversation? Why is a man on a horse in Durban, in Zulu attire, chasing what? The spaza shop that he's left in the township in his garage.
You know, these people, they don't use they don't use logic. They do not use logic, because when the community is protesting, I cannot say before I can join the protest, I have to go and close the store which is in my community. Before I can join the protest, I have to make sure that my profile is perfect, is 100%. Because the protest is about the community coming together so that they can raise their issues, so that their action can be seen, so that their intentions can be identified, so that at the end of the day, the government can, like for an example, enforce the law. Once the government enforces the law, then all these stores, even the store that is next to my house, even the store that is next to my house will be closed. Why? Because right now, the government has decided to enforce the law. The government has decided to enforce the law. So these people are out there sending a message to the government to say, enforce the law, enforce the law. It's not like they are like, they have to like go out there and like shut down all these stores. So whenever they shut down the stores, is to send a message to the government to say, you have to do something. We have to show you what we are doing. It doesn't mean they will close each and every store in South Africa, but is to like say to the government, give us the attention. But these people, like, it's like they think like people who want to go and live in this planet. But let me not talk about that particular planet.
That takes rent from you rent your garage out. So what is the problem? We must be able to define it without inviting hate. What are we trying to resolve amongst the poor? That there should be peace among the poor, that there must be peace among Africans in particular. But if we do not name the problems properly, that's why today you will say Amashanga. Tomorrow you say South Africans. Tomorrow, you understand, none of that. So
as I come to the end, I just want to say, stop following politicians, because if you follow the politicians, you are also following the colonizer. Unless if you love the colonizer. You're following the colonizer. Why? Because The structure was built out there by the colonizer. And the colonizer called it politics. Why? Because the colonizer understood very well that the politics is a delaying system, is a delaying tactic to say, let's go and sit down and negotiate. Let's go and sit down and negotiate. And the moment they start wearing suits and start negotiating, you have to know it's over. This is what happened in 1994. Even today, we still sit down. Even all these corrupt municipalities, they always hold meetings, wearing suits with beautiful cars, but no solution. But no solution. But when people go out there on the streets to say, let's show the government what we want, then those people are bad, those people are evil, those people are tribalists, those people are not good. Obvious. Many people will buy the story. Why? Because people who are saying all these things are regarded as Pan-Africanists, people with black heart, people who are like, but at the end of the day, we are not even aware that these people are serving the very same colonizer. What I hate about politics is to follow someone who follows the very same person who oppressed our forefathers for thousands of years.
If everything can be paused, I will ask the spiritual court to put death on hold so we can have time to breathe, and the rain of tears shall stop.
I have an appeal to the Supreme Court of Justice and Truth. Your mediation is necessary. Pause everything for a moment.